Okay, thank you, Sarah. I was kind of concerned last week when Travis introduced me as the program and the return of the day that I would log in and there'd only be about 4 or 5 people. So it looks like we're up to 26. So I can rest easy now. Awesome. So I'm going to quickly turn it over to Becky, and I got a preview of her presentation yesterday. I attended the Board of Realtors luncheon, and Becky did a fantastic job. So there's no reason for Pat to keep talking because I'm going to let the expert get on. And we do have some experts with us. As already been mentioned, Monty Carnes. Monty's ready to answer all questions related to streets and those kind of details. And so we appreciate him joining us. And Becky, I'll just turn it over to you because you have a face that's great for video and a voice that's great for audio. And then Rachel will follow in and tag in when we need to. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Pat. Can everyone see the screen and hear me okay? That's good. Someone say yes. Yes. Okay. I'm just going to assume we're fine. Well, thanks for having us to present on the transportation tax. This is, I think, my 8th presentation this week, and I've been to several clubs and talked a lot about this, but looking forward to talking to my own club the most about it. So I did invite some city employees. So that when there's questions at the end, you can address those. Monty Carnes, our Director of Engineering, and then everyone knows Norman McNichol, our City Manager. So we'll have time for questions at the end. I'll get through these slides fairly quickly so that we can answer those. One of the things that these projects came to be, so I talked to the club in the fall about our time projects, and we talked about several needs that we have in our community, streets definitely being one of those, the fire station, animal welfare. So we now are back with an actual question on the ballot. So next week on Tuesday, well, today or tomorrow for early voting, and then Tuesday at your polls, you'll be able to vote on 3 different questions. And so as we know, there's the mayor question, and then also the 2 propositions. So the first proposition being this transportation sales tax, and then the second one being the visitor tax that Chris spoke about a few weeks ago. And if you have any questions.
Excuse me for interrupting. I don't think we're seeing your slides. Are you sharing them?
Oh, I am.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to mention too. Yeah.
Oh, can you not see them? No?
No.
Oh.
Are you? Did you go and actively share the slides?
I did. Let me see. Maybe I'll make it work this time.
There we go.
Okay, now are we good?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Well, good. Thanks for telling me and not letting me go through the whole thing. Okay. So we have those 3 questions that you'll get to vote on February 8th. So this one specifically is about the transportation tax. And as we went through the community all last fall and asked our community what are the needs, how should we address the revenue, it's no surprise to anyone that our roads were at the top of the list of the greatest needs that we have in Stillwater. One of the things I want to mention before we get into specifically transportation tax, and I shared some of this in the fall when I spoke to the club about our critical needs, but we have some funding challenges that are just because we are a municipality in Oklahoma, and then with other external factors addressing it, just we have some funding challenges that we just need to address before we get into asking for additional revenue. And so one is that Oklahoma is the only state that does not allow ad valorem for the general fund. We primarily rely on sales tax revenue to fund what we need in the general fund and in our community. And then all of us know that prices have gone up, and so that's no different for any critical project that needs to get done in city limits. Prices have gone up for that as well. And I want to show you this next slide just of our budget so you can have a general idea of our fiscal year 22 budget. We anticipated bringing in $24 million in revenue this year, and then we're looking good with that. But if we just look at our departments mandated by state law alone, so that's right at $22 million. And those departments include the city manager, legal, fire, police, those are mandated by state law, and just those alone, we're almost at what our anticipated revenue is. And so when you add our other departments in, it's no surprise that we have to look for additional revenue to do some of the needed projects that we have in our community. And that brings us to the transportation tax and why we are proposing this on February 8th. So just a little bit of background to our transportation tax. Currently, there is a half-cent transportation tax, and it generates approximately $4 million a year annually to maintain streets. This was originally passed in 2001, and it's been approved several times since then. It's set to expire in 2026, and so that's what we currently have. This new proposition would increase the transportation sales tax by another half-cent, making it a total for 1 cent. And so how the question reads whenever you are at the ballot and you're voting on it, when you're at the polls and voting on it, how it reads is if it passes, it'll repeal the current half-cent sales tax, and it'll replace it with 1 cent so that they both expire at the same time and sunset after 10 years in 2032. So it's only an increase by a half-cent, but we're repealing one, replacing it with the 1 cent. And this would provide approximately $8 million annually to fund streets, sidewalks, bicycle pathways, hiking trails, much needed projects that we have in our community. When we brought this to the community in the fall with all of our different meetings at presentations at different clubs and in our town halls that we had, and we were talking through revenue and asking our citizens, how would you like to pay for these projects? It was a very, the majority of people said that a sales tax seemed like the most fair way to address this specific need that we have. And if we think about it, and Stillwater is a regional shopping hub, we have people that visit us from Perkins, from Perry, from all of our neighboring communities, but we also are the home to Oklahoma State University, which we're very proud of, and also brings in a lot of visitors during the fall and all throughout the year. All of these visitors contribute to our streets, and we would like to have a tax. The sales tax would allow anyone who shops within city limits to contribute to fixing our roads. And so it removes the burden solely from those property owners within the city limits and shares that burden across anyone who uses our streets and shops in our town and in our community. So our current sales tax is 8.813%. And the proposed one, if it passes, would be 9.313%. So currently our sales tax breakdown, 4.5% goes to the state of Oklahoma. Payne County gets 0.813%. And then Stillwater currently gets 3.5%. And of that, 2 cents goes to the general fund, 1 cent to our utility authority, and then the half a cent, as we mentioned, to transportation projects. And so if this passes, 4% would then go to Stillwater. And this is of no surprise to anyone, but in Oklahoma, there are many different tax rate brackets. And so not all municipalities have the same tax rate. The highest community in Oklahoma, the highest tax rate is 11.5% for sales tax, and the lowest is 5.5%. So our current sales tax at 8.813%, there are 44 higher tax rates than Stillwater within Oklahoma. And that represents over 300 communities that currently have a higher tax rate than us. With our proposed sales tax rate of 9.313%, there would still be 30 higher tax rates than Stillwater in our state, and that represents about 200 communities that would still have a higher sales tax rate. Out of our neighboring communities, you can see there what those around us have as their sales tax. So our current rate at 8.813%, you have Guthrie at 9%, Enid 9.1%, Ponca 9.25%. Cushing has the same rate as what ours would be if it passes at 9.313%, Shawnee 9.5%, and Perry 10 and 0.25%. So if someone was upset about a new sales tax increase and refused to shop in Stillwater and wanted to go to the nearest Walmart, that would be in Cushing, and that's the same tax rate as what this new sales tax rate would be if it passes. So I sometimes like to just know, how does this affect me as a mom of 2 kids, I go grocery shopping on the weekends, spend about $150 in groceries. So on that current $150 purchase, I'm currently paying $13.22 in sales tax. If this passes on that same $150 grocery store purchase, or any $150 purchase, it would be $13.97. So that's an increase of 75 cents to that same purchase if this passes. And I know that, whereas I see that 75 cents and I think I can handle that, that's fine. I know that that affects families differently depending on your income level. So that's the nature of a community in Oklahoma that relies primarily on sales tax for its general fund. That's just one of our realities. Currently, there are $68.5 million in non-funded critical projects, and I'm sure Monty can tell you all about those. And I'm sure each of you has a street that you want to add to that list as well, that you drive on a regular basis. So over the next 10 years, if this passes, we would see approximately $80 million provided through this 1 cent transportation sales tax. And knowing that projects take time from conception, from planning to construction, and with costs projecting to increase due to inflation, we think that this would really allow us to get a handle on all those projects, so that then we're just tasked with maintaining instead of catching up and being far behind. This is how the question will look on the ballot when you go to the polls to vote. It's just good to know what it says, and it's everything we've described already, that if you're voting yes, you're voting that the half cent would be replaced with the 1 cent. And if you're voting no, you're voting that it would stay the same. So it's just good to know what it is, how the question is worded, so that you're an informed voter when you go to the polls. And then the last thing I want to mention before we open it up for questions is this time advisory board. And this is something that we heard a lot from our residents in the fall when we were asking people about critical projects and ideas for revenue, was this idea of having an advisory board that would be almost like the liaison between citizens and city government. We want to add that extra layer of trust in this 1 cent sales tax and in any of the other time projects that we have down the road. This advisory board would provide input and assistance to ensure that our projects are built on time, they're built on budget, and they meet the expectations of our voters. So this is an important component that is new to this, that if this passes on February 8th, council will see this resolution creating this board, and they've already asked for that if this passes. I am going to stop sharing my screen here if I can figure that out, and then would love to hear questions you may have. How do I do that? Oh, there we go. Okay. And like I said, Monty's here. He's our Director of Engineering, and Norman's on the call. So if you have any questions about the tax itself, or about projects that were done in the past, or projects that need to be done in the future, we'd love to have that discussion. Or if Rachel and Pat want to add anything, you're welcome to. Your names were on the presenter list. So.
Okay, I'll start out with a question. This is Tim. I'm curious about 6th Street. I know that that's state funded, that's a US highway. How much of this money is going to go into repairing and updating 6th Street, or will that all be external funds? Unmute, Monty.
He's unmuted and talking, but.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So 6th Street is ODOT project. They're typically when we do something with ODOT, it's a joint venture. On 6th Street, our responsibilities are to purchase any right of way that's needed and to relocate any utilities, any utility relocation costs, like AT&T, ONG, and those public utilities are allowed to use the right of way. But if they have to be relocated because the public wants the right of way, they do it at their expense. However, if they're on private property and have an easement and have to be relocated, then we have to pay those costs. And then, of course, we're responsible for relocating our water utility and our electric lines. So when they first came to us, they talked about wanting us to get as many utilities out of that corridor as possible, including the big 69,000 volt electric line. And we, first we went, oh my gosh. And then we got to thinking those utilities are 50, 60 years old. This improvement's going to be for another 50, 60 years old. It just makes sense that we wouldn't put new infrastructure over that old. And so we're looking at ways to redesign so we can bring water lines from the back of the properties and not have them out in 6th. There will be there's some sewer that's got to stay out there. A neat thing about the electric line was the electric guys came up with a route that comes from the substation north of 6th on Sanger. We'll take it down to about a half a mile south and then back east along 12th and go through some of that area of the floodplain. And they will have to have access to that line so we can make some kind of a trail through and along possibly along the creek in connection with that. And that helps our active transportation component that we like to do as well. But where we are on that, we're about, ODOT's at about 65% of the design of the project. When they complete that, that's when we can go out and start purchasing right of way and start moving utilities.
So just as a follow-up, is that money for that project included in this $80 million that was just mentioned?
Well, that would be council's decision and city manager's office. We've identified some funds from general fund. We've been knowing this is coming, but certainly the additional half-cent, we could use those funds if we needed to. And that would, of course, run through the advisory committee as well.
Thanks.
Becky, we had a question on the chat about what kind of majority is required to pass this measure.
Just a simple majority, so we just need one more in favor than not to pass. And one of the things that we want to encourage really is just to get a high voter turnout. We don't historically have high voter turnouts in Stillwater, so I would just love to see our citizens showing up. You can make a big difference in local elections, so just spreading the word to get people to vote.
And I think if you have cabin fever and want to get out, you might be able to vote early today. Is that correct? You
can. So at the Payne County Administration Building, I think it's until 6 p.m. both today and tomorrow. You can vote in the election office on the second floor.
8 to 6 both days.
8 to 6. Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Thanks.
And I voted at about 8:15 this morning.
Did you stand in a long line, Monty?
Just walked up, nobody in front of me.
Just
I
asking.
voted about 11:15 and I was number 24, I believe.
Oh, wow. Any other questions?
Let me call you back in a few. Okay, good night.
All right, well, if there's no more questions, let's give Becky a round of applause. Thank you. As you know, Stillwater Frontier Rotary supports literacy, so we'll be donating a book to the Stillwater Public Library in your honor.